Welcome to the Elevate Your Event podcast, where we talk about how to plan and execute an unforgettable event that will dazzle your guests and generate more income for your organization. From fundraising and securing trendy auction items to event production and logistics, get the best tips and advice from seasoned fundraising and event professionals who have been in your shoes.
Welcome back to the Elevate Your Event podcast, where we talk about all the ways that we can help you make your next fundraising event better than the last one. And today we have a really cool topic, and this is probably one that most of our clients don't think about, but then once we educate them on it, then they become really interested in, and that's around the idea of authenticated merchandise. So this is typically signed stuff. So in the studio with me today is Kristen Wheeler.
Yeah, I'm excited about this topic. We've been talking about having this episode for a long time.
I know. Because it comes up every time we do an event and we're looking around saying, is that signature real or not? But the special guest we have on the podcast today is a good friend of mine, Ray Schulte. Ray, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, talk about your company and kind of your background as it relates to Memorabilia.
Good. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. You know, I always enjoy talking about this, and if there's any way that I can actually contribute to somebody, you know, looking down the right path and doing the right things, and you know, that's such a it's for me it's satisfaction, because I know when you go down the wrong path, it's hard to get on the right path. And so for me, the authentication is so important. We've had conversations over and over about this, and trust. I think trust in your business is really important too. And like you mentioned, a lot of the people, especially in the nonprofit sector, they don't know what they don't know. And that's an issue. So education is very important too. And I know that you pay attention to this, and you mandated that the clients that you have, you try to educate them as much as possible. But there's a lot of turnover and there's a lot of things going on in the category. But my background comes from I was with J. Walter Thompson, New York ad agency back in the '80s, and I got the idea that I wanted to package ball players just like I package a box of hot cocoa on the retail shelf. And back in those days, that wasn't happening. And so I quit, and I look back and I go, wow, what did I do? But it was one of those impulse moves, and I'm glad I did it. But I started working with athletes. I was packaging athletes. Sugar Ray Leonard was one of the first guys that kind of got me to this point where I felt it was an opportunity. Pete Maravich was another guy. Don Mattingly was my first client. And along with representing an athlete, you have to actually, it's not just maximize opportunities, it's protecting them from the elements, protecting them from the people out there that want to take advantage of you. And back in the '80s, it was pretty rampant in terms of unauthorized forged signatures, whether it was Joe DiMaggio or Mickey Mantle, whoever. And, that had to be cleaned up. I worked with Major League Baseball closely, and we got to the point where, we put out a campaign, and Major League Baseball started authenticating. And so people started coming together and understanding, the process, the need for it. And so from that point on, that's kind of what I've been doing. It really is not just managing athletes. I've worked with corporates. I've worked with nonprofits in the past, trying to put them in a frame of mind where they can, with confidence, go out and solicit items, because, most of the time, an executive director, either he or she will do it themselves, or they'll hand it off to somebody, but they don't have the background. They don't understand why something is authenticated, why it isn't, and for sure, they can't tell the difference. Many people in my industry can't tell the difference. And so there's authentication companies that are out there. And so they help within the industry. But again, what I found out in the nonprofits is a lot of them, a lot of people were handed down stuff that they didn't even know what it was. And, was it a signed baseball or program or whatever it may be. And so the first thing they had to do is try to figure out, identify what they had. And then, what do they do with it? So, at this point in time, I can tell you that if you have something authenticated, whether it's by a company called JSA, PSA, Beckett, it first of all, it enables you to sell at confidence, probably make 20-25% more than you would make anyway because of that confidence. And a lot of people would put their own holograms on it when I say like local people. And that doesn't fly when you're trying to sell something to Seattle or sell something to Miami. And Hampton's in the position where you were selling things throughout the country, sometimes and many times internationally. And so you need that level of confidence and also too, just for the people that are watching this, the authentication is just an opinion. It's obviously an opinion from somebody who's done their due diligence, somebody who knows the industry, somebody that follows that for a living, but it's still just an opinion. But I would say 95% of the time it's correct. And so, I just think that is so important, especially in the nonprofit sector. And people just need to know, just what they have and how to go about it in terms of being able to get it authenticated and also to look at the value of it too. Many people don't realize, how much is a Mickey Mantle baseball worth. And so you kind of have to get your tentacles out there. And what I always say is get to know somebody in the local market that you can trust, that at least has an understanding of the industry, at least can point you in the right direction and educate you. So
right.
That's kind of it in a nutshell.
No, that's good. And so let's unravel. There's a lot in there that you talked about that I think is going to be helpful. So let's unravel this. I want to tell a couple stories. The first one I want to tell is something that you mentioned earlier, and this goes in line with charity fundraising and authentication. And I had known Ray for some period of time, and so my mother-in-law had attended a nonprofit fundraiser, and at that fundraiser had purchased a Mickey Mantle signed baseball. And I mean, I don't think she was any of the wiser of it. And I think she spent $1,000 on it. And, to her, it's like, this is great. This charity got this donated, and then I'm going to, spend $1,000 with the charity anyway, and I'm going to get this great baseball for my grandson. Well, I thought one day, as Ray is educating me on all of these things about sports memorabilia, I said, I really should go up into Jake's room and grab this thing and ask Ray if this thing is real. So he saw it on I think I took a photo of it, and he's like, oh, you better send this to me. I don't think so. So I mailed him the baseball, and you were off at a conference, and I think you took it and showed it to JSA and PSA, who are both reputable authenticators, and they both said it was fake. Mm. And it's just a bummer. I mean, and, look, one of these days I'll replace my son's baseball. He doesn't care right now. But, it was just one of those things where, the charity had probably no idea that this was not real. And obviously the bidder had no idea. That was my mother-in-law. She had no idea that this was not real. And so that's the unfortunate part of this. And this is where the education comes in. And okay, so before I tell you where Ray and I met, I'm going to tell another story very similar to that. And that was another auction that I was at. Ray was not there. And we were walking around, and they had a Bruce Springsteen signed guitar. And I'm like, okay, I got the drill on this one. I'm just, again, curious whether or not this is real. So I took a photo of it, texted it to Ray. He texted it to another colleague of his, and it came back with a definitely fake response. Oh, and so I had to go tell the auction manager, hey, I hate to tell you this. I know you got up to $4,000 in bids on this guitar. This guitar is not real. And of course, she's thinking, how do you know? And I said, because one of the most, I would say, respected authenticators in the market, somebody who's been on Pawn Stars many times, has seen the photo of this and is telling me it's not real. And so we took it out. We deleted the bids on it, and we removed it, and that opened up, to where are charities getting this stuff?
That was going to be my question for Ray is, other than going directly to organizations like your local baseball club, where should people be looking to have a higher chance of an authentically signed piece of memorabilia?
Well, that's a great question. Just one quick thing before I get into that. Back in the days, I understand this too. Back in the days, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, Babe Ruth era, these guys, you would have their secretary sign the ball. They would have, in Babe Ruth, when he was on his deathbed, he had the nurse sign the ball, gave it to his niece, and so that's why you need to have it authenticated. But where you get the product from, you really just have to find people that you can trust in the industry. And there's kind of collectible shops throughout the country, big and small, and just to get to know these guys, and they can help you out with product too. But ask questions, find out who do you use for authentication? Where do you get your product from? And if you're really going to be in it for the long run, when I say long run, I mean like 5 years, you want to do that, because normally, back in the early days, I remember when I was working in the nonprofits, you would just put the feelers out there, right? And anybody who was in your, congregation, or anybody who was, part of your organization, they would just go out and ask people for things. And, a lot of times that's where you got a lot of the unauthenticated stuff. But you just got to make sure that everything is, you can talk to a JSA or PSA, and they go around the country. I mean, you go to their website, you check them out, and they may be in Denver, Colorado, like in 2 weeks. And what you do is you just go down there, introduce yourself, establish a relationship with them. And so that, like, when your next auction or your next situation, you have somebody you can call and say, hey, listen, I've got this great item. What do you think? And they can do some, kind of what I call preliminary authentication, via email, via text, which will just kind of give you, say, hey, maybe we need to take a look better, or absolutely not, no way. But I think you just get educated, because you got to get educated because of the value anyway. And the more you do that, the more, bigger the return you're going to have. But you have, at the end of the day, you want a hologram on that piece. You want a certificate by itself doesn't help unless you have the connection to the item and the certificate, which means you have a hologram on one and the same number of hologram on the certificate. That connects the product, because otherwise you can just, a lot of people in the old days, what they do is they get a signed baseball, and they just write their own certificate. And so that looked like it was real. And like in a lot of towns, small towns throughout the country, people didn't know any better. Well, this guy gave me the certificate. Who is it? Joe Smith. Okay, well, Joe Smith is not an authenticator.
Right.
And he may be doing it deliberately, or he may have been just doing it by, being naive or making a mistake. But either way, you don't want that. You don't want to handle that call that you get where they said, I spent like $500 and this is not real. That's the thing that from a nonprofit you don't want to hear.
Right. No, I agree. And, I think the best place to get a piece of signed memorabilia is from the person who's signing it. Maybe, even take a photo of you standing next to the guy while he signs it or something. Those are hard, right? That's hard to do. You can go to your local professional sports teams and they will give you stuff. And they typically now, I would say, are doing their own authentication on these, right? They're giving you their own certificates. And that's, I don't know, to me, I feel like that's relatively new, because back in the day, even several years ago, we weren't getting those, say, from the Denver Broncos, but now every single item comes with it. And I think that helps.
But here's the thing, Jeff. One of the things you have to understand too is, like, let's say you get something from the team, it's a certificate, but if there's no connection between the item and the certificate, then, what they can do is just use that certificate for something else,
Right.
And so that's why that connection has to be there at all times. It can't be just just a generic certificate that even from the team. I mean, it's all goodwill intention, but it
Right.
can be misconstrued or deliberately taken advantage of by people out there who do it for a living. And there are people out there that, they'll forge your signatures, items, memorabilia. And so you just have to be aware of that.
Yeah. And let's go back to, Kristen's question about where do you find something. So when we brought up the issue with the Bruce Springsteen guitar being fake, then I asked this auction manager, I said, okay, so where did you get this? And so she tells me, and we go and we look it up. Ray and I did, and it's a website, and they have like everything. Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen, they have everything you can think of on this site. And there's like inventory of them. Like they went and got Bruce to sign 10 guitars or something like that. And so I was like, okay, that's a little fishy. Then we pull up their terms and conditions. And I don't know if you remember this, Ray. They basically said on there that it was a violation of their terms and conditions for you to take any of their stuff and have somebody else also authenticate it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, that would be like going into the doctor and getting a diagnosis on like a heart problem. And then the doctor telling you, you're not allowed to talk to any other doctors to see if I'm right. No second opinion. And I said, who does that? Right. And then they had some comment about how they're all ex-FBI forensic analysts or something like that, and they're signature experts. And anyway, all of it sounded fishy to me, but especially the part where it's like, we do not allow you to take any of our merchandise and have it authenticated by somebody else. And so I look at that and say, anybody, if you're out there looking at merchandise, and an authenticator tells you you're not allowed to get a second opinion, you run from that authenticator as fast as possible, or you run from that merchandise as fast as possible.
Well, and I'm thinking of an example like Peyton Manning, who is not connected with a specific team anymore, but I would bid on something that was signed by him. And it seems like, I'm sure he has his foundation and his agents and his people that you can write in to request. But what if a friend of a friend of a friend is his next door neighbor and gets something signed and he tosses it to them? Sure, no problem. You get it authenticated, but then you don't have a certificate of authenticity, or does the authenticator give you that?
The authenticator does. Like, I don't know what you think, Ray. I would probably mail this to Beckett and have them authenticate it, or take it to the national conference or something like that.
And I think again, a little knowledge helps. I mean, Peyton Manning, we know that he's affiliated with Fanatics. So many of the holograms are going to be from Fanatics. And like you said, if he just tossed the ball to somebody, that's okay, but it's not going to be more than you think. And so, somebody like, and the great thing about in today's world, with the industry being so hot and so humongous now, there are card shows and local shows, regional shows throughout the entire country. I mean, almost in every city, large and small now, there's some kind of card show, signature show, whatever. Authentication company most likely is in that show, because that's where they make their bread and butter, from people coming in from the outside to get things authenticated. So a show is a good place to go to get educated. It's a good place to go to bring your stuff. If you have 5 items, you have no idea what they are in terms of, are they real? What's the value? You can take them into a show and find credible people that will, steer you in the right direction and tell you, what you should do about it. And I think that's the biggest thing. The show that I'm going to in Chicago is it's like the world's largest one for collectibles, and every authentication house, every grading house, every appraisal industry person would be there. And a lot of people come for that exact reason, just to kind of get educated and to make contacts. I mean, you go into a retail shop, you go into a show, and you're there to make contacts so that you can make reference once you need to down the road. If you have an auction like 6 months from now, at least now you have a reference. So I met that guy in Denver. He's with JSA. I'm going to give him a call, and I'm going to see, are they coming by? Do I need to get these authenticated? Now, obviously, and it's all based on menu pricing and all that. So like a Babe Ruth baseball is going to cost a little bit more, but the value is more. But you don't have to pay for, maybe a third baseman for the Rockies or whoever. It's not going to be as much. So, it's all relative. But I think networking is probably the best thing to do. And Jeff, we talked about this just by having, like on the website, having just reference, in terms of people that they can contact to get educated, to find out what's going on. And I still think that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely it is. And, and I think that's one of the things that's on us here at Hammett. I think any mobile bidding company needs to help their customers understand where to get not just like reputable providers of this merchandise, but also how to get their stuff authenticated. So we'll make a commitment to do that, in the weeks upcoming here, to have some sort of information page on that for sure. So let's also, so we talk about in this case, the reason why you need to get this authenticated. The obvious one is you do not want to sell something that's fake, right? It's embarrassing to the charity. It's absolutely embarrassing to, to the person buying it. And you're not trying to put your donors in that situation, right? The other reason, though, that and I got educated in this, and this is the story where I first met Ray. Okay, so we were doing an auction for one of the NHL hockey teams. And so I was actually at this event, and it was kind of one of their, kind of annual gala auction events. And they have obviously a ton of signed merchandise from their folks. And this happened to be the Washington Capitals. And it was interesting because I see this guy, he walks over and they're like, hey, this guy wants to meet you. And so Ray walks up to me and he said, this is really cool software. Did you build it? And we're like, yes. So we start talking, and we traded business cards. And then he was pretty excited because he got, he had to leave the auction early, but he got to keep bidding in his car. Hopefully your wife was driving. I think she was.
Yes.
Because he wanted to win these items. Well, about 2 or 3 days after this closes, he copies me on an email into them, and he was commenting on the fact that there was some game-used gear from one of the players, and he says, this says game used on it, but they're Bauer shorts, and this hockey player doesn't wear Bauer shorts or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was Ovechkin. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, how does he know that? Right.
That's next level. That's like that guy that called into the TV station for adding bird sounds into the golf tournament that they were airing. So
yes.
Those birds are not seasonal to this place or this time. Wow.
But Jeff brings up a great point, because when you're doing auctions, and let's say, and I've dealt with a lot of people out there that are on the other end that buy, vintage memorabilia. You need to have as much detail as possible when it comes to, let's say, something that I don't remember if that was between $500 or $1,000, but that's a high price. That's significant. When you get to that level, you better make sure your copy is telling that potential bidder what that is exactly, because that matters. The fact that that wasn't his brand told me that he didn't wear that. But
he apparently wore them in warm-ups, is what we found out.
And I wouldn't even say that, because these guys don't want to get caught photographed in a competitor's brand, if they're endorsing a certain brand. And so I figured that out. It wasn't difficult for me, but I figured it out that, hey, you can't, you can do it if you want to, but I'm never going to come back.
Right.
And that's not what you want to do anyway. It's immoral. But, when you're talking about different levels, from $20 to $20,000, you better have enough detail that I want to know every single thing about that item. And that's important, Now, a lot of nonprofits don't really do that. One, because they don't understand. And two, they don't want to they don't have the time to do. But right. I was running Cal Ripken's. I actually started Cal Ripken's auction when he was going through the Hall of Fame, and so I dealt with a base of high end collectors throughout the the mid Atlantic section across the country, And so I kind of got their mindset in terms of what they're looking for, what they're expecting. And so for me, it was easy to, to look back and say, hey, what? All right. And I blame myself really, because I should have never trusted, the way it was presented, but it shouldn't have been presented that way. So, again, a lot of the nonprofits don't really feel like it's necessary to do that. But a guy who's good, if you're going to spend $500 and you're not me, you're gonna want to know exactly what's going on with that product, and it's true today. I mean, I don't spend anything unless I know, you've got to be absolutely clear, what you're selling me, or else I will do it, because not just because there's fakes out there, but just misrepresentation or misidentifying it, or not giving enough identification on it. I'm not going to spend the money. I'm not going to go that far up. So,
well, you're not trusting it either, probably, right? I mean, and that's so. And I think a lot of our hockey clients have done a really impressive job as it comes to doing this. And I think it's gotten better over the years. But I learned a lot. I've been doing events for a long time. And then I got with Ray and we're looking at these items and we're saying, sure, they'll sell. And they've got maybe a Beckett certificate of authentication or a JSA or PSA one. But look at this description. I mean, it says, Peyton Manning signed jersey. Okay, well, then I hand it to Ray and we look at the item and it comes back with, like majestic replica jersey, blue, signed by Peyton Manning in black Sharpie, the signatures on the 9 on the back. It's like you get all the way down to this level of detail, or like on baseballs where you list out all the inscriptions, like they'll put in Hall of Fame or, whatever on there. And so you have to list those out, because the collectors are looking for that information. And then the number of photos we took. So for all those auction platforms out there that give you one photo, I don't know how you effectively do this, because when we're looking at something as valuable as a Peyton Manning signed jersey that could go for $1,000, and Denver might even more than that, like that item, like you need a close-up of the signature. You need both sides of the jersey. I mean, there's all the, like, if I were sitting down with Ray and we were doing this, there would probably be 3 or 4 minimum photos we'd be taking of this, just to make sure that anybody who comes across this that is a serious collector that will spend that kind of money is satisfied.
Yeah. So what are those basic elements that charities need to be including in their item descriptions?
Well, first of all, I think, and this, it's different now. I haven't been involved in nonprofit auctions in a couple of years now, but I was very heavily involved in it, maybe 5-10 years ago. And what I saw was that, from a nonprofit side, they just didn't have the right attitude in terms of, they thought, well, this is for a good cause, they'll buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't have that attitude if you want to sustain. And if you want to create a database of faithful, high-end, middle, low, you've got to really, really, cater to them, and at least give the appearance that you care and go through the whole process. And most of the time, I would talk to somebody and they say, "Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it." And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you just missed out on like $400 or $500 value, because if you did, and people knew that was, a pretty cool item, they would bid on it. But they're not going to bid on it unless you give them, some meat, And so hopefully it's changed a little bit, but it all goes back to, how much time they got vested into the nonprofit, and just their outlook too, in terms of, do they understand that if they put in some time, they're going to make 30, 40, 50% more money, and they're going to have a loyal base. And that way you can go out and ask for higher things because you have that loyal base. But unless you do that, with my base with Ripken Baseball I knew the top 25 bidders. And I knew what, some guys focused in on game used gloves, fielding gloves. Others were bats, others were jerseys. And I knew. And so I made sure that every time we had something, that we gave them everything they needed to make that purchase. And so that they felt comfortable when they spent that $20,000 to make that purchase for that Brooks Robbins fielding glove, that they were going to say, yep, okay, I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. Now, that's a little bit of an extreme, but still, if somebody's going to buy something that's 500 or 1,000 in a community nonprofit, that's a lot of money to them. And, they still want that confidence, and they need that confidence. So I always said, I've in conversations with Jeff, years ago, I just said, these executive directors or people that they hand off this responsibility to, they just need to be in a community where they can talk to each other. And, some have better expertise than others, but if they can develop this community, it would help everybody out, whether it's the Boston Celtics or, whether it's, LA Clippers or whoever it may be, it's an advantage for them.
I agree. Yeah. Hey, look, our service team's happy to help too. I mean, if you're not exactly sure, you don't know where to go, we can point you to the resources that Ray's described. If you're having a hard time finding sports memorabilia, I'll give you a couple tips and tricks. I mean, if you don't feel like you can get it locally, I understand that. Look on HandBid. Sometimes, I mean, this is funny. You will find memorabilia up there that's in a city that it's just not going to sell well in. Like, I've gone on and I've found Denver stuff in other auctions, and I'll bid on it. 30%, 40% of what I think it can sell for here, and you're paying for it, but you're going to make a profit on it. Another good place I go, and I know, Ray, you know these guys well. I think they're great. Pristine Auction. I've gone onto their site, their sports memorabilia site. I think you can get some reasonable deals there. Stuff sells quickly there. Obviously the more popular stuff is going to be more expensive, but I bought a John Elway jersey on there for, I think, $350, authenticated with a certificate. And a John Elway jersey will sell in Denver for over double that at an auction. Yeah. So sometimes you just need to kind of think through, like, maybe it's not going to be free, but it's just going to be a heck of a lot easier than you trying to chase John Elway down on the Cherry Hills golf course and ask for a signature.
Jeff, that's a good point. Pristine is a great place to check out the, what's out there in the market, what it's going for, what the value is. And you'll see it 95, well, actually 100% is all authenticated. But, for me, it's just knowing what you can do in terms of like what the value is. And the whole thing about, I'm an auction. I like this. I wouldn't say connoisseur by any means, but I'd say I'm a realist of that. Bidding is bidding, and you got to give them an opportunity to bid. How many nonprofits will put something out there at retail value? If a baseball is retail value $350, they put it out there for $350, and you don't get that bidding. In auctions, if you put it out there for like 20, 30, yeah, you take a little bit of a risk, but you get those 3 or 4 people bidding, and then all of a sudden it's $500. So to me, that's what you really got to, have a little confidence. Of course, you got to know the category a little bit better so you can take that risk, but you got to give that to these people. Bidders don't want to come in and just buy retail.
Right.
Your true bidders don't, and that's what it ends up doing. So, and I remember talking to a few nonprofits. I said, just give it a try. I mean, you don't have to do if you have 300 items, you don't have to do all 300 items that, what I'm talking about, but take about, 5, 10, 20 items, do it at, $20, make a separate category and get them thinking that way and understanding that, hey, sometimes they're going to get a deal, but sometimes you're going to make money on it too. But if nothing else, you've got them like in your database and they're loyal customers for you. And, all this goes into what I consider a successful nonprofit auction. All this mindset that we just been talking about is so important, and I'm really I've always been high on you in terms of what you've done, and willing to talk to the nonprofits and educate them and be a resource. I think that's so important.
No, I appreciate that. And that's a good way to kind of summarize and wrap up this conversation, which has been hopefully helpful for everybody listening or watching in. So as we talked about this, there is a lot of, unfortunately, let's just kind of wrap this up. There's a lot of fake stuff out there. And so how do you determine what's fake and what's not? You need to have some sort of authentication on it. And there are only a few, I'd say a handful of respectable authenticators. If you have items or merchandise that is not authenticated and it has a signature on it, you should get it authenticated. And to do that, my recommendation is JSA, PSA, or Beckett. We will put some resources out there for you on the Hembid website that will point you in those directions. Outside of that, if you're working with any authenticator who tells you you can't get a second opinion, they are not the authenticator you should be working. I think the other thing you mentioned, which is super important also, is the idea that the item and the certificate need to have a matching hologram with them, just so you know that those two things are connected. Because to your point, a sports team could print out 55 or 100 certificates that just sit in a box, and every time they send something out, just grab one out of the box and send it. But that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about, I'm looking at this item, and I'm going to go ahead and basically endorse or basically authenticate that this particular item is real, and you basically put the sticker on, right? And there's others, right? I mean, I'm not going to say, and Ray, we can work with you to get the list of all valid authenticators, but I think that's a good place to start, because what that does then is that gives you the comfort that the item that you're offering to your bidders or your donors or your most respected supporters is real. And so when you walk in their house, a year later and you're staring at the signed guitar on the wall, you don't have to say to yourself, oh, bummer, I really do realize that I sold them a fake one. So you don't have to worry about that.
And the authenticators, they travel throughout the country. I mean, they're on the road all the time. All the authentication companies are throughout the entire country. There's ways of finding out when they're going to be in your town, and they're probably in your town quite a few times during the course of the year. But again, it's probably, if nothing else, just to go to meet them, talk to them, probably ease your mind a little bit in terms of
Sure.
The unknown, and give you a good networking source to go later on or sometime down in the future.
Right. You pull these donations throughout the year. You could figure out when one of those guys is in town, and you know them already, so you set up your appointment or find out what show they're at or what store they're at, and roll in there and bring in your latest donations to get them authenticated.
Well, one more thing, Jeff, and if you have like a quantity, if you have like 20 to 30 or 50, 100 items, you could actually call up like a JSA, Beckett, or PSA, and they will come to your place. So you could actually get them to, one of their guys to actually come to your place and authenticate right in your office. So,
awesome.
I mean, there's no reason why you can't connect with these people.
Right. That's great. That's great advice. So we have it. It's authenticated. We know it's real. So now let's describe the item in a way that's going to be meaningful to the real collectors out there. Because let's be honest, yes, you'll have a few donors going after this, but you can make considerably more money if there's anybody who does have an interest in this particular item or just in the category in general by improving your item descriptions and in putting in the right amount of photos and taking photos of the right parts of this item. You can significantly increase its value to those that are bidding online. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I think, for this conversation, I mean, I think we could sum it up right there. And then if you need help finding these things, again, we mentioned a few places, reach out to us, and we're happy to help you kind of find something.
We'll put it all in the show notes too. So
Let's do that.
Click through.
Ray, this has been an absolute pleasure. Again, it's always good to talk to you, and stay cool down there in Phoenix.
We'll try. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up this episode of the Elevate Your Event podcast. We thank you guys so much for all you do. And the listeners out there, leave us a 5-star review if you found this information helpful. Please pass on your questions and comments to us. You guys have been doing that. It's been great. Share this podcast. If you know of anybody who might be interested in this particular topic or just the general topic of fundraising, this would be helpful for us and for them if you connected us. So until next time, happy fundraising.